coming up on the Outside of Sunday podcast. Today I'm here with Liz Goodgame, and we're just going to have a little chat about life and marriage.
I think the early part of our marriage, actually, that transition was quite easy for us in a lot of ways. I think that we had a good working relationship and people that were praying for us. I think kind of thought maybe that we were a little bit bulletproof and we were a bit arrogant in our...
See, you're like, marriage is great.
Yeah, things really
Why
were
people
great.
saying it's hard.
Yeah. There was a shift in his training when I started being angry about his work. There wasn't much room to change that situation, but I think that we both got to a place where it just wasn't working anymore.
Hey, you're listening to the Outside of Sunday podcast. Is your faith stuck on Sunday? Christianity was never meant to be constrained to a weekly church service. I'm Christa, and here you'll find discussions on the Bible, mum life, and of course, how to live your faith outside of Sunday. All right, welcome to this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. I'm Christa, and today I'm here with Liz Goodgame, and we're just going to have a little chat about life and marriage. But one thing I just wanted to say before we start is I just love how we're grey gals together, dye-free. How long have you been dye-free?
I've never dyed my hair.
I think you've told me this once before, but I forgot. You've never?
No.
Ever?
I mean, like when I was in junior high, I did like a kit with my friends, but I've never
You never made that commitment.
Yeah. And I think mainly it was like a financial thing when we were younger and didn't have much margin. I didn't want to pay for it. And so I've never dyed my hair.
No.
Just kept it going.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I stopped maybe 4 years ago.
Okay.
Or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've never looked back.
Yeah.
I love it. I can't wait until it's like solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be a while anyway.
Yes.
But yeah. So welcome, Liz,
Thank
to the
you.
podcast. I'm so happy that you said yes and agreed to be on here. It's very special for me. But for those who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. I am a mother of 4, married to my husband, Ben. We are Americans that are kind of immigrants here in New Zealand, and we just really love the pace and culture, and it's just been a really good fit for our family, and we love the outdoors, and yeah.
And because we're a Christian podcast, and so are you a Christian? Yes,
I am.
You are.
I am.
And when did you come? I mean, I knew that, but just in case anyone listening didn't. So when did you first come to faith in Christ?
I grew up going to church really regularly as a kid, and I have really nostalgic good memories of that church experience and that community. I was part of a congregational church, and then we were part of the Methodist church when we moved to Texas. It was a religious thing for me. I didn't really have much of a personal understanding of what my own faith meant. But looking back, I think that sort of, methodical foundation really is invaluable. But I started in high school attending kind of a non-denominational youth group called Young Life. I don't think that's something they have here in New Zealand. But
I've never heard of that.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's just sort of a relational outreach, and it had a huge impact on my life. Young Life leaders typically sort of just get to know kids at high schools, and they will go to their sports games and just kind of be a part of, just be a part of their lives. Is it sort of
like mentorship?
Yeah, it is a bit like that. And then there's sort of a weekly club where you go, and it's real fun. They'll do games and sing, and it's usually at somebody's house, and sometimes there's a little bit of a high school band vibe. And then at the end, they'll share the message of Jesus. And I really loved Young Life as a high school kid. I was pretty not making great choices in high school, but my Young Life leader was just such a huge part of my life. She just really cared about what I cared about and showed up in my life in a really personal way. And it meant a lot to me. And so I would go to everything. I just loved Young Life Club. I'd go to the Bible studies. But it wasn't until I went to a camp when it was kind of the summer before my senior year. It was a camp in Colorado, and it was really powerful for me. It was really, I think, it's really my first kind of experience with like radical Christian hospitality. It just was very, it's just really such a neat place. And I heard a message about Jesus that was really different than what I'd known before, and kind of was really intrigued by the idea that God knew me and really all the parts of me and had a plan and a good adventure for my life. And I was really quite hungry for that. I really wanted to like suck the marrow out of life and like really wanted to, and I was doing that in all kinds of different ways, but I just wanted something that was like real and kind of exciting. And so that was intriguing to me. So I kind of, I just said that I wanted to be a believer, and it really just it just changed my life. Like it's just very immediate, as it is often for people. I just couldn't get enough of that. And I was really hungry. And then, went to college, and I was a young life leader in college and kind of got involved in that same sort of relational ministry of sort of, meeting kids where they're at and being a part of their lives. And so it was a really powerful experience for me.
And is that how you met your husband, Ben?
It's not actually. Strangely enough, his brother was on a camp with me that I went to, and there's a few other camps. His sister was a leader at a ski camp I went on, and his aunt was a part of. She was a young life leader on the camp I went to. So I knew a lot of his family, and I'd heard a lot of stories. But
was this everyone like preparing you to meet him?
No, I mean,
like
I think,
set up.
No, not at all. Ben's quite quiet, and we met at Texas A&M kind of through mutual friends that
A&M,
were Texas A&M. It's a university in Texas. Okay. So I had known a bit about Ben. Just I really wanted to marry someone that was equally as excited about adventure and making the most out of what God had for us. And I met Ben, and he was really going to be doing the things that I wanted to do in life.
Same page. He was on the same page.
He was, but he didn't know he wanted to marry me as early as I did.
I have a similar story. I knew after 6 months of dating my husband, I was like, okay, let's get married. And he was like, whoa, I'm not ready yet. Similar thing?
I mean, I think that I convinced him. But,
sometimes I need a little bit of encouragement. I mean,
we're quite personality-wise quite different. He's very introverted, and I'm not.
Okay, so you met your husband.
Yes.
You convinced him to marry you.
Yes.
And then how did you two come to New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of years in between when we met. My husband's a doctor, so he went to medical school. In America, you do 4 years of undergraduate, and then you do 4 years of medical school, and then you match for a residency program, and that can be kind of all over the United States and lots of different places. And so we finished our university at College Station, and we got married when I was kind of finishing my teaching degree. And then we lived in Texas when he was doing medical school in Galveston. And that was 4 years. And then he matched at a program about 30 minutes south of Philadelphia in Delaware. So we just, moved to the other side of the country, got pregnant shortly after we moved with our first. And then, Ben did actually a 5-year residency, which is quite long, but then he did a 2-year fellowship. So we had a really long period of medical training. And
that's a very long time.
Yeah, it was. I think the early part of our marriage, actually, that transition was quite easy for us in a lot of ways. I think that we had a good working relationship and similar values, and we had a strong family background and people that were praying for us. I think kind of thought maybe that we were a little bit bulletproof and we were a bit arrogant in our.
See, you're like, marriage is great.
Yeah, things really were
people
great.
Saying it's hard.
Yeah. Things were quite. We didn't have much conflict, but we sort of realized that was probably because we were a bit conflict adverse. And so we brushed, little things under the rug. And after a while, those things kind of build up. So we had 4 kids, and Ben had just a really grueling medical training. And I was super involved in really great things, but really we just overextended ourselves and kept doing that without sort of reassessing at each point. And my husband, Ben, grew up in overseas. And so we, for a while, thought maybe we would do missions. And then for a while, we really thought that maybe I would go on staff with our church and we'd partner in kind of creating this hospitality-based ministry. And so we kind of had all of these things sort of lined up for when Ben was going to finally finish his medical training. And then just like the bottom just absolutely fell out.
The bottom fell out.
The bottom fell out, like in a really big way.
Okay.
And so I was pregnant with Jonah, so our 4th, and, we just had a lot of little kids. That season's just quite intense. And we just really had a breakdown in like trust and just everything fell apart. And so kind of didn't really know, we didn't know what we were going to do. And Ben really felt like we should go overseas. And so
that's a very interesting thought. When you're like, the bottom has fallen out of our marriage.
I know.
Everything's in pieces. Let's move overseas.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really, that was really the feedback we got from a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah. And, for me, even, I just was so unsure that it was the right decision. It was really scary. He was sort of at a peak in his career as well, where he had really just a lot of opportunities. And we just pulled the plug on like everything. And I wasn't sure that it was the right decision. Ben was really confident, and I can like look back now and just see how wise he was in making that decision.
Okay.
But at the time I was really scared and just had really, just felt quite vulnerable for us to make that kind of decision. We didn't have much money, and we didn't have much margin for error.
Yeah.
And so it felt really scary. And, but when I think about that, I think courage has always been like something that I've admired a lot in people that I respect and I'm curious about. Courage is a theme that I think it's throughout the Bible so often. It just talks about fear, don't fear. And when I think back about how unsure I was, and then just sort of the ability to kind of take courage in that moment, I just think God really honored that in our relationship for both of us.
And so was that to move to New Zealand, or was it to a different?
To move to New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that we really were in a scary place, and I think we both wondered if we were going to make it. And, but we weren't really verbalizing that. I think that can be quite scary when you start talking in that way, because it just changes your mindset. And so I think that we were really careful about our language around that season. I think we both had a lot of questions and doubts about whether or not we were going to be able to work things out, but we weren't talking in a way that indicated that we were considering divorce. But we had a lot of problems that we needed to work out.
Yeah.
And so I think Ben really knew that we needed space. And that's been sort of another theme in our lives, is like, I think God has just totally honored the space we've created for our marriage and for our family and for him. And I think that is one thing that's really hard to do. I think it's really hard to create space when you're overwhelmed. And I think when I think about that season of leaving, just a pretty chaotic life, and just moving to New Zealand, it was like nothing but space, which can be quite scary to
and
face.
while you only really had each other,
yeah,
you were each other's person.
Right.
There was no one else to kind of pick up the slack.
Yes.
So in a way, did it kind of help your marriage?
It did. I mean, not immediately. I mean, I think that we both had a lot of work to do in our own personal lives to get to a place where we could really start healing our marriage.
If you're enjoying this episode, please make sure you like and subscribe.
It was quite a lonely season, I think, for both of us. Ben's more comfortable in that space than I am. I don't like that at all. But we were really fortunate. I think God just put some really great people in our lives when we moved here. And we just started doing things that we enjoy, which was quite helpful. I don't think I realized how much I'd stopped doing things that I enjoyed in that season. I really lost my identity in a lot of ways.
Well, when you have 4 kids, it's definitely a shedding process of yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, everything just is about the kids, and for a season, But I think what you're saying is so important. It's something I've definitely noticed in my life is that when you do stop doing those things that fill you up, you've got nothing to draw from almost. I mean, yes, the Spirit can help us and encourage us and fill us and that, but we have also a responsibility to care for ourselves without being selfish. I know there's like a balance. It's like, yes, we sacrifice for our children, but we also have to be able to, make that space. Yeah. Can you just explain a little bit more about what that season really looked like? Because I think it's important, to kind of give people a picture so that they can pick up on it when they get to that place as well, and to say, okay, it looks like I'm getting into this spot. We need to do something about it. What was your marriage looking like when you were in that time where you both were thinking about the D word, but you weren't saying the D word, and you were just kind of churning through life? What did it look like? Were you communicating?
We weren't communicating. I think that we'd lost a lot of, I think from a really strategic perspective, Ben was working so much. Like, I think that was why things were broken. We just didn't have any space for to work on things. Like, I think that one of the things that we've learned in the last several years is really having an ability to hone in on what the problem is. I mean, I think that we are better about paying attention to patterns that show up in our marriage. And so we just didn't have any time to even look at the problem. And so looking at the problem is hard enough as it is, but then sort of trying to figure out a strategy for addressing a problem is a whole other thing. And so we just didn't have any capacity for any of it. And so, when you don't have capacity to, look at or address a problem, then they just start compounding. And that's sort of what happened. I think that for a long time, the problems were little, and, you can kind of just not address them, and that's fine. And you can go, for a certain amount of time without addressing conflict, but we just didn't have any capacity for it.
So was it just like a compiling of everything that was not being said?
Yeah. I think things that weren't being said, but then just also like a misalignment of what we wanted, I think that probably one of the dynamics in our marriage is that I have a strong personality and Ben's, he's more quiet. And so I think that kind of got to a peak. He was working so hard, and trying to finish his medical training. And I was working so hard trying to kind of keep things together at home. And so we really lost touch of what we were working together on. And so I think that there was a shift in his training when I started being angry about his work. And that tension really kind of grew. And so, and it is hard. I mean, it's a real reality of people that do medical training or anything that, requires sort of, when there's no changing about what you have to do to become a doctor. You just can't, you have to do those things. And so he didn't have any flexibility to sort of say, okay, well, I can lay off a little bit in this area. And so there wasn't much room to change that situation. But I think that we both got to a place where it just wasn't working anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have been there. Like, I mean, I've spoken to you about it before. But my trigger was not necessarily work or, I suppose that's like a building resentment as well as being angry. But for me, it was when my dad passed away and I felt like my husband wasn't meeting me, if you know what I mean. Like, he wasn't comforting me in my grief. He was just like ignoring me is what I thought. But he thought he was doing what I wanted, which was space, because I'm a social person, an outgoing person. But it's like a weird combination where I'm like, okay, enough now. I need to recharge by being alone. And so he just left me alone way too much. And then I was resenting him, and then he wasn't understanding why I was getting annoyed at him. And then it just built and built and built. And then it was just basically like toxic, and we were just not friends. Were you guys even friends? Were you talking, or was it?
Gosh, at the end it was really tense. It was really hard, and we're very different in a lot of ways, but we both have sort of this achiever kind of thing, and so we can kind of push through a lot, and so we work well together as a team, and we were pretty focused on just like working to get through the season. We sort of both knew that we needed to just like get to the end. After we'd made the decision to move to New Zealand, it was like nuts. So we just, we had all these kids and a baby, and we were trying to like save money by not hiring a mover. And so we were moving, stuff from our house to the storage. It was just like logistically an absolute, I feel exhausted even. Like, I feel like I could cry even thinking about how tired I was in that season. And so kind of getting to New Zealand, we did come together as a team to sort of like get that thing done. And that was like the beginning of a new foundation that we were building, which was really good. And so then, I think an unspoken understanding was that when we got here, that Ben would not work as hard. And so that really freed me up to like kind of I learned how to play roller derby, which is a really fun part of my kind of coming to New Zealand.
So cool.
So there's, and Ben started fishing more, and we'd go on
So
hikes
almost like it gave you,
yeah,
I suppose that's what you were saying, and now I understand it fully. It gave you the space to slow down.
Yeah.
And to be people again, instead of just like working all the time. Like you were working all the time. He was doing his training all the time and working. And 4 kids. Yeah. Crazy. So it was just like in this too much space.
Totally too much.
And so coming to New Zealand gave you that space.
It did.
And was that what kind of helped turn the tide?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, we are just in such a era of busy, it's just like a busy world that we live in. There's so much going on and so much that we can be a part of. And the space that we found in this move was really pretty incredible for us. It's really what we needed. It was hard. I mean, I think that neither of us wanted to slow down necessarily, because it's easy to kind of keep going. But yeah, it did. It really created just sort of the environment for us to sort of be curious about each other again, which is really what needed to happen, because I think we just lost a lot of sight of who we were and who God made us.
And when you were in the hard season, that busy season, what was your relationship with the Lord like at that time?
Yeah. One of the things as a mom is that you just sort of have to figure out when you can make that, how you can engage with God in the midst of like a lot of chaos. And so I really learned a lot of practical tricks for just like engaging quickly with God. I think that it was very simplistic, my relationship with God. It was very much like, I need help now.
Yes.
And being sort of achiever-minded and not being able to have it all together. I was leading a ministry then and really, really involved in kind of upfront stuff. And my life was falling apart in a lot of ways. And I think that taught me so much. It was really a sweet gift from God that he sort of taught me that even when things are really a mess, that's sometimes when he works the best. And so it was a real fruitful season for me in a lot of ways. I had really sweet relationships with people, friends that really prayed for me and just carried me. And that I can look back and just really say, just be thankful for that.
So you'd just have moments where you just grab like a few seconds or something like that, just to like address the Lord during your day or
definitely. And then, I mean, I think that there was a lot of community. Like I was leading an organization. Have you heard of MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers? No. That's a really big thing in the States.
MOPS,
I know it's kind of a funny, it does sound offensive. But I was coordinating Mothers of Preschoolers for our church, and that is a really cool. It's probably a little bit like
mainly music.
Yeah, in that you come with your kids, and the kids actually. Indifferent than mainly music. There's all these lovely women and men that take care of your kids so you can have breakfast and chat with other. Yeah. It was really special, and it was a thriving ministry, and we had such a neat leadership team during that season. So that was really, really valuable to me. It was a huge expense energy-wise for me, but the way that God filled me in that season when I really needed that kind of friendship was really special.
They are special groups and definitely like very vital, especially when you're in that young mum, not even a young mum, but just a mum of young children. Yeah, you definitely need spaces like that. Yeah. So how do you think that your marriage survived? Was it purely the fact that you moved countries and you came to New Zealand, or was there something else, do you think?
I think it's primarily that we didn't give up. And so for us, that looked like moving to New Zealand. And part of that is the way God designed us. I think we both, God knew that we needed an adventure. And I think the fact that we had the courage to take that was the beginning of a foundation for us. But I think that decision can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people, but the primary thing is that you just don't give up and you keep trying things. I think I try a lot of things, and when things aren't working,
you're an ideas person.
I am an ideas person.
You really are.
I am. And so if something's like not working, then I try something different. And so
I think that's great. Yeah. Especially in a marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that we were willing to keep trying things, and that looked like marriage counseling for a while. That looked like being a part of a small group and talking honestly about what was going on in our lives. That looked like moving to New Zealand. I think that you just kind of do have to commit to keep trying things.
So who was it that made the call that we're going to go see a marriage counselor? Coming up next week on the Outside of Sunday podcast. Actually, I threatened my husband with going to marriage counselling. He really didn't want to go to marriage counselling. And so I said, well, if we're not going to go to marriage counselling, we are going to do this. And I just called it Wedding Wednesday.
I can see now how strong our relationship is and how different our prayer life is. If I'm really honest, we both had major crises of faith in that season.
Congrats, you made it to the end of this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. Thanks for the support. Become an official outsider by liking and subscribing and leaving a 5-star review. If you'd like to help our podcast grow, maybe consider becoming a member of our Patreon community. Membership starts at just $3 a month. Not only will you be helping us encourage more New Zealand Christians to live their faith outside of Sunday, but as a member, you'll receive access to full episodes right away. No more waiting for next week. Just click support the show in the show notes. As always, if you'd like to connect with the podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Outside of Sunday Podcast. And don't forget to let someone you know about this podcast.